Welcome, my friends. Thanks again for joining us for another episode as we continue studying through the Word of God together. We're glad you're with us and hope the next couple of minutes will be a help as we continue studying through the book of Mark. We are just in the beginning stages of studying through this gospel, and we are currently in Mark chapter 1. We're going to jump into verse 29 here in just a second. For a little bit of context, Jesus had been in the synagogue. He had cast out a demon and then had the conversation about making sure that demons stay quiet because the demon was trying to reveal his identity to everyone, and this wasn't that time in his earthly ministry. He was going to go through as a teacher, and it would have really disrupted one of the purposes Jesus came down, which of course was the demon's goal. It was one of Satan's tactics while Jesus walked the earth. So we're going to see something similar to that, but what we're going to see in the next couple of verses, we're just going to finish up chapter 1, is we're going to look through different times where Jesus was healing, because you see that was a major part of his earthly ministry. It was a part where he encouraged people, he showed his power. You would assume that people would just automatically naturally recognize him as the Messiah as a result of this, but in those days, this type of stuff, some of the supernatural stuff, was not 100% of them, but at least they were very superstitious. And for example, in a moment, we're going to hear him talk about the fact that he cast out many demons from people. And I find that intriguing because I don't personally believe that the supernatural activity of Satan and his army was more of it in the Bible days than there is today. I don't believe that. I think it's just as powerful today. I just think it's just more deceptive. In those days, it was straightforward. You kind of recognized it for whatever reason. In today, as a great deceiver, Satan just approaches it very, very differently, or we just don't even recognize it as much. But we're going to go through and look at Jesus and see a couple things from his character, how he approached it, and just how he approached people as we look at these verses. So again, Mark chapter 1, beginning in verse 29. And immediately he left the synagogue and entered the house of Simon and Andrew, and James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law lay ill with a fever, and immediately they told him about her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve them. So what you see, first of all, is this is one of his disciples, Simon Peter, one of his disciples, and they tell him about the fever, and Jesus immediately goes over, and he grabs her by the hand and brings her forth. Now, the one thing I see from this is in a moment we're going to see how he healed the masses. And, if you look at this from his goal is just to be popular, just to gain a following, then he would maybe limit his activity to masses. And yet in this situation, he focused his attention on one person. So you get to see there's a personal nature to this healing, where he went and helped somebody that was close to him. It wasn't just a popularity contest. It wasn't a following thing. He was going to love on the people who were around him, and he loved on their family. So we see that, and healed her enough to where she had the ability to get up. It wasn't like, okay, the fever will be gone for a little bit, and then it takes a day or two to recover. Healed her and gave her enough strength that she could get back up and go back and work and go back and serve. And so that this amount of strength, it was just like, I was sick, now I'm completely healthy. And so that's the ability. He just totally eliminated the condition that she was having. But then we continue on, verse number 32. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or oppressed by demons. And the whole city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. Again, so now we go back from just healing one who was of the family of the disciples, and he moves back out to the masses where many were brought in. Of course, this is part of what he was doing in earthly ministry. He was going to teach, as we'll see in a moment. That's primary duty was to teach the gospel and to point people to the cross or to this new gospel. But he was also there to heal people, to show that he wasn't just a preacher. He was there to take care of people. And I think there was a level where he wanted them to recognize who he was. And without it being spoken per se. So he goes out and he's healing people of diseases. And we see that many were possessed by demons, and he cast them out. It's intriguing, or should I say not really overly intriguing, the fact that, like before, as he casts the demons out, he makes it impossible for them to speak. Again, what you see, number one, is his authority and power over the demons. A lot of times, I've heard this said a lot. I probably at some point said it myself as well, that in our world, really what you see is a supernatural battle between Satan and Jesus, the good and evil. And I do believe that. I believe that in the background of most of what we see is a fight between Satan and God. The problem is sometimes we get the idea that it's an equal battle. Yeah, God wins in the end, but right now it's an equal battle, as somehow Satan and Jesus are equal. I hope you understand. Jesus is God. He is the third. He is the second of the triune of the Trinity, but he's God. He's all powerful. He was never created. He's always been. Satan is a created being by God. So the idea that, yes, there is this battle and that somehow the battle is equal is just not biblical. It's so wrong. And what we do is you look at it that way. Here's what happens. We bring down the deity and power and authority of Jesus, and we bring up the power and authority, and we, to an extent, deify Satan. Satan just was an angel created by God. Yes, more powerful than us as angels, as they are created, just unique in how they were created. Very powerful, very rebellious. He's still alive. He's been alive for thousands of years. All that is true, but he has a beginning. He is not divine. He's not omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, those things that make God God. He's not any of those things. So to think that this battle is between, Satan and Jesus and it's equal, here's what we have. We have Satan, who's powerful and no comparison to God, and God has just given him certain freedoms while we're on this earth. He's the prince of the power of the air, and he's a deceiver, he's an accuser. He's been given these freedoms, and God at one point, will just stop it all. But until then, he's given that for the reason that we have to choose. He's giving us, seeing both sides, that because he wants us to choose him, because we choose him. But it's intriguing. We look at this. He has complete authority over these demons. He just by his voice kicks them out and then says, "Oh, go, but keep your mouth shut." This is how much power he had over multiple demons. And again, I do find intriguing that the area of recognize whether they thought maybe the people were, maybe today we call them mentally ill. Not that I'm saying that is always in possession. I'm saying is they didn't maybe know how to describe all of that in the New Testament time. But whatever it is, he recognized them as demons, cast them out, but immediately shut the mouths of these demons. And so you begin to see an intriguing aspect here of his authority, his power, as he's healing the masses. But then we move on we see a little bit of his personal time. We see, shall we say, the human nature, a little bit of the human nature of Jesus, and how he is showing us something that he needed. And boy, if Jesus needed it, how much do we need it the more? Verse 35, and rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out into a desolate place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him, and they found him and said to him, "Everyone is looking for you." And Jesus said to them, "Let us go to the next towns, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came out." And he went throughout all Galilee, preaching in the synagogues and casting out demons. Now notice, there's a lot of people still looking, and what did Jesus do? In the midst of the time where he could have done more, he stopped, he got up real early in the morning, because I think too much later it would have been too busy. He decides, before I move on with everything that's going to come, I need to spend some time with my Heavenly Father. This is the second person in the Trinity. This is God, 100% God, 100% man. But there was that limitation because he took on, Philippians 2, took on the form of a servant, took on the form of humanity. And in that, man, there would be the physical limitations. He would be hungry. He would be tired. He would be physically exhausted and spiritually exhausted. So he pointed out, not just as an example, but as a need to be with God and to regain that strength and to have that communion. I imagine the communion with God was a little more unique and intimate than maybe we have, but he showed it necessary to the point where nobody could find it where he was. What an example that shows for us. And then he gives the example, I got to go preach. I'm not going to go back to the people. We're going to continue on. I got to go preach. I got to go back to the reason I came. Healing's great. All these things is wonderful, but my primary duty was to preach, and he continued to do that in spite of the amount of physical exhaustion it must have brought. Remember, he was human. And so, even though he was divine, he was human. And so, or else if he didn't have that limitation, the cross would have had a whole lot more limitations. And so we see, to recognize the human limitations here shows that he would have felt, from a human perspective, all of the torture that would have come years later on the cross. There's one more healing that takes place here. And Frank, I don't want to say it's one of my favorite ones, but there's an aspect of this story. And this is not the only time Jesus will heal a leper. There's something very unique to this story. And it's unique. I read a book, I think it was Max Lucado, gave us a story, an account of his point of view of this healing, and his approach to it has always stuck with me. It's in verse 40. It says, "A leper came to him, imploring him, and kneeling said to him, 'If you will, you can make me clean.'" Notice, he says, if you will, you have the ability if you choose to. You have the power to make me clean if you choose to. So he's immediately acknowledging you have the power, and I'm pleading with you to do this. Verse 41, "Moved with pity, Jesus, stretched out his hand and touched him, said to him, 'I will be clean.' And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. And Jesus sternly charged him and sent him away at once. And he said to him, 'See that you say nothing to anyone, but go and show yourself to the priest and offer for cleansing what Moses commanded for a proof to them.' But he went out and began to talk freely about it and spread the news, so that Jesus could no longer openly enter a town, but was out in desolate places, and people were coming to him for every quarter. So this man comes up and he kneels. Now, let me just give you a little bit of history behind what would happen with a leper. Leprosy was a disease that did not have a cure. And what would it basically, once you had it, it was a death sentence, and it would ultimately, portions of your body would fall off, and it would just ultimately eat away your organs, and you would die. So when most of the time the leper was sent outside of the city, they usually had leper colonies or whatever, they were sent outside the city to die in protection. They wanted that protection. They didn't want to give this to their kids or their family. But when they would enter the city, the rule was that they had people had to scream unclean. The leper had to scream unclean, unclean, screaming to everybody. They were leprous, screaming to everybody that if you get close to me, you're likely to get sick. One of the things you got to notice then that means is think about the loneliness that would have been. Outside of other lepers, they would have never been close to another person. So imagine, and again, this is theoretically, we don't know these things, but I like, as this author said, think about this. What if he did have a wife and kids? He finds out, he sees the spots, they begin to tell him you're a leper, and they send him out of the town into the leper. Probably not sent home to hug his wife and say goodbye or his kids, because if he's got it, he's got an even greater chance to give it to them and ultimately kill them. So for their safety, he's going to leave town, and he's going to get out of there any way he can and stay away. So now he's coming back in. And can you imagine, I actually could have put it this way, can you imagine maybe more than once in this time when he's leper, he would go maybe to the top of the hill, overlooking maybe where his family was. Again, we don't know, but what if? And he would look over and he'd look down, he'd see his wife, see his kids, and there would just, it would, inside of him, if I could just hold her once and just hug my kids. And imagine that one of the greatest problems of the disease is not only the fact that it will kill him, is that he will be lonely through the entire process. So this is the way he's lived for possibly years, away from his family, away from anyone else. And then Jesus comes. And notice, Jesus heals him. And then Jesus tells him to go to the priest. So that was their rule. Go to the priest, prove. They have to go through this ritual, Old Testament ritual, to prove they've been healed so they can be put back into everyday community. Do all those things. Don't tell people for the same reason. Let's keep this part of who I am or what I've done quiet. But what grabs my attention in this is not only did Jesus heal him, and he, again, healed many other lepers, he touched him. He did something that no one had done to this man for years, likely. Something that nobody would ever dare do, because it could have meant a death for them. And the first thing Jesus does, being moved in compassion, touches him, then heals him. Now, we know that Jesus would have been able to heal himself, I guess, however you put it. But I think it's intriguing that not only did Jesus heal him of his disease, Jesus acknowledged one of the great struggles that come with that disease. It just shows that Jesus, he sees them personally. He sees the people he's healing. He sees us personally. Well, whether or not he will heal us from the situation we're in, whether or not how long he allows us in some of these different seasons, Jesus sees us personally. He took care of the friend of his disciple, the mother-in-law of his disciple. He took care of people corporately. He had to spend some personal time alone, but in all of that, he saw the person behind the disease. You just get to see the character, the personal nature, and the reason Jesus came, his love for people, for his creation. May that encourage you that whatever you're going through right now, Jesus not only sees what you're going through, he sees the battle inside. He sees maybe the strain, the financial strain or physical strain or work, whatever it is, but he also sees the internal battle that maybe you won't tell anybody else. And that's what Jesus sees. And we can go to him. He's not going to look down and say, how dare you? He's not going to get angry. He's going to recognize it. And like he reached out and touched this man, something that had not been done in a very long time in his life. He will help you in those areas that maybe you don't even realize you will need help. There's so much more to it. He is so much more than just a superpower that wants to bring help to our life. He wants to have that personal relationship with us. And that is what makes our belief and our faith, so much better and so much different and real. Well, I greatly appreciate the privilege you give to me to be part of your day. I hope this is a help. I hope it's encouragement. I hope you stick with us as we continue in our study through the book of Mark. And until next time, God bless.